Now we're going to hear from our special guest in the studio. Callum Watson is an award-winning pianist, multi-instrumentalist and composer, and a prolific producer, spanning genres including jazz, classical and theatre. He won the Margaret Schofield Scholarship for Composition. He's written original scores for 9 theatre productions, and earlier this year he represented Australia at the 25th International Young Composers Meeting in the Netherlands. As a jazz pianist, Callum has played at Bennett's Lane, the Melbourne International Jazz Festival, has studied with the jazz faculty at Juilliard Music School in New York, and he actively curates Geelong Jazz Soirees, which are a monthly event in Geelong. Now, Callum has agreed to play 3 compositions tonight, one of which is a composition of his own, and the other 2 are arrangements of his. One is a Fats Waller piece, Whitechapel from the London Suite, and the other one, which is going to open the trio of selections, I'm going to leave it to you to identify what that piece is. I'm going to throw you over now to Callum Watson. that was Callum Watson at the piano. His three pieces were from the beginning, his own arrangement of Marie Cowan and Banjo Patterson's Waltzing Matilda, with a couple of very cheeky quotes thrown in. The second piece was of his own composition, Playing with Division. And the third, of course, was Fats Waller's Whitechapel from the London Suite. So I'm going to invite Callum to come into the studio now, and we're going to have a bit of a chat about his life and work, and all of the things that led him to where he is today. So welcome, Callum.
Hello, Peter. Lovely to be here.
Thank you for that. That was most enjoyable.
Thank you very much.
Really did enjoy that. The arrangement of Waltzing Matilda. What inspired that?
Well, I think it was just a moment. I was thinking, what could I add to this? I pretty much put in everything, didn't I?
You did. Yes, I like the ABC quote. That was particularly entertaining. That was great.
I think I was going for a very much a white colonial theme, like the ABC. That's the white Australia sound, isn't it?
Well, it is, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, it's nice to hear a new take on that. There's been so many arrangements of Waltzing Matilda. That was a breath of fresh air. And then, of course, your Fats Waller arrangement. That was beautiful. And there was another quote in there, of course, of Warsaw Concerto.
Couldn't resist.
Fantastic. I think we've all had a go at that one at some point or another. And so Fats Waller is one of your heroes in some way?
Yeah, I've been playing his music for as long as I've been playing piano, really. You can't go past Ain't Misbehaving. That was probably one of the first tunes I learnt on piano.
Really?
Yes, it stayed with me for a while, the Fats Waller music, yeah.
So you've got all of his transcriptions and all of those sort of things?
Yeah, all those 10th chords in the left hand, that's what it's all about.
That's right. Builds up a mighty technique, doesn't it?
Oh, it does.
That's fantastic. And then, of course, your third piece was one of your own compositions, and that's available on your CD.
Echoes of Earth on Spotify.
Highly recommended. It's different arrangement, though, on the CD.
Yes, that one's for flute, bass clarinet and nice grand piano. It was recorded in St Andrews, Brighton, just down the road.
Oh, yes, I'm familiar with that place. It's got
lovely
a good
acoustic
sound, hasn't it?
Oh, it's very rich.
Lovely. Oh, fantastic. I'll have to get online and seek that CD out. I'm sure that many of the listeners will do so too after having heard that composition. It's very beautiful. Now, I am interested in finding out, were you from a musical family?
Well, I heard my great-grandfather played piano.
Skipped a couple of generations then,
yeah.
hasn't it?
What else? I suppose my great-uncle plays medals with a few instruments, but I'm the only one that's played it really seriously, I think, as far as I know.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Because most of the people I know that have gone on to make music a career seem to have been immersed in music and had people around them all the time performing it. So for you to be one out of the bag, it's a
bit of an oddity. Yes.
Yeah, that's a bit unusual. So how old were you when your musical education began?
My first memory of playing the piano probably was a really old piano at kindergarten. You couldn't get me off it, but I think I started formal lessons when I was in grade 1. Started with classical. I was down in Lawn at that stage, so I went up to a little cottage in Deans Marsh, out in the country.
Fantastic. A little old lady.
Of course.
Of course.
As is a tradition.
Did you get the ruler over the knuckles when you hit a wrong note?
I did, I have to say.
Fantastic. I love that story. I must have had the only piano teacher that didn't do that.
Lucky man.
Yeah. So after that beginning, where did you study music at a higher level?
Well, then became the lovely addiction of jazz. That was... I was still in Lawn in that stage. I think I was in grade 4. Went up to Torquay with this man who introduced me to jazz. Started with like Fats Waller and of course, the 12-bar blues, all that kind of stuff.
Mm.
Then he introduced me to fiddling around with jazz standards. That's what really got me addicted. All the
Right.
things you can do with just a very bare framework and
Right.
turn it into something like that performance.
Wow. And is that where you learnt to improvise?
Yes. Oh, improvisation is a lifelong learning, I have to say.
Oh, of course it is. And the longer you do it, the more you realise you have yet to learn.
Yeah, and you've got nowhere.
That's amazing. So, and the fact that you're a composer as well, I've always thought there's a very close correlation between improvisation and composition. How do you reconcile the two?
Well, composition is obviously fixed in time. Improvisation is spare of the moment. So most of that performance was improvised.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Composition. Well, I fell into composition as a bit of an accident.
Mm-hmm.
A group I was playing with, just needed a set to play. They didn't have a composer to rely on, so they called upon me, and I had to write a set of charts, and that's where it all began.
Wow. I've always thought that everyone who's a composer must, to some extent, be an improviser to be able to actually create the ideas that they eventually then write down and set in concrete.
Well, Beethoven, Mozart, and Bach were great improvisers. That's set in history, isn't it?
That's true. That's absolutely true. So, your performance history is quite varied and very colourful. Perhaps you can tell us about some of the highlights of your performing career.
Well, I've done a number of classical recitals in churches, even with chamber groups, including that CD performance with my little trio of clarinet, flute, and piano. But then there's the jazz stuff, which I've been doing for years and years and years and years, either with just a rhythm section or the occasional big band. Yeah.
Wow. Which big bands have you been working with?
I do this occasional little residency at Brand Market. They have a lovely big band that plays on a few Saturdays of the year. Yeah.
Terrific.
It's a favourite of mine. It's
Yes.
nice, chill, big band music. Doesn't get much better.
Excellent. Yes, I love a good big band. I always start the show with some big band music.
Oh, you have to, yeah.
Yeah. Now, the other thing that I remember we chatted about just before the show was the fact that you being a composer and particularly interested in Australian music. Do you feel that there is an Australian sound? And if so, is there some way you can define it?
The Australian sound.
Many have searched for it.
Well, there's certainly a white colonial sound. There's a sound of white Australia. That's pretty easy to define.
Mm-hmm.
It's that's your 1-4-5s and fanfares and all that. It's basically in the classical tradition, but in jazz, it's much harder to define. It's more set in scenes. Like Mount Gambier has a lovely scene led by James Morrison.
Mm-hmm.
Queensland has its own scene, and especially Melbourne has its own scene. It's very much rooted in keyboard players like Paul Grabowski, Joe Chindamo, the likes of that. It's very much a keyboard tradition down here.
Mm.
But in terms of a whole Australian sound, I suppose we're channeling the Dutch jazz scene. Like even the music of Louis Andriessen, if you've heard of him.
Yes, I have.
Yes, that seems to be a lovely channel into the new explorations of some of our jazz artists, like the ones I just mentioned.
I agree. I think on average we're probably closer to the European tradition in many ways than the American. There seems to be, I don't know, it's perhaps a more ambient sort of sound.
Yeah.
It's not as hard, perhaps.
Perhaps, yeah.
I mean, obviously that's a gross generalisation, but
Of course, yeah.
but a lot of the European jazz that I play on the program, I think, is very close, in fact, to what we play here.
Seems to be more about timbre, yeah, if you could generalise it even further.
Yeah. Well, hopefully
it's about the overall sound, yeah, rather than the harmonic approaches as we go even further into the cutting edge of jazz exploration at the moment. Yeah.
Well, that's several programs in itself discussing
Oh yeah,
the
isn't it ever?
intricacies of that. In your life as a composer, you've had a number of commissions. What sort of commissions do you generally receive?
Well, well, I just did one for an orchestra in the Netherlands. It's an interesting experience. They can play absolutely anything. Also, just the basic trio format. That's a great thing to work with. Also, just did a commission down in Geelong for 7 saxophones. Now that's a interesting thing to work with.
That's fascinating. Have you heard it performed yet?
Yeah, it was just on Friday actually.
Terrific.
Went very well. The audience loved it, which is great.
Were you happy with it?
Yeah, 7 saxophones. It's like using a pipe organ. You just treat it in different stops of sound, so you can pull out one stop of a section of soprano saxophones, put it back in, bring in the baritones, or you can bring them in all together. That's the best way to treat it, I think.
Fantastic. Are you planning on recording this work?
That's the idea. See if we can get further support and make it something that everyone can hear. That'd be good.
Well, send it in to us. I'm sure Tony Thomas will definitely play it on his show. And we might play it on ours as well. Now, you're also running some regular jazz soirees down in Geelong. Tell me about those.
Geelong Jazz Soirees, yes. This is just how many times I've been doing it? This is just the second one, actually. So it started in, I think it was March we started it. And the idea is we bring together artists for the first time. So at the gig is the first time we've usually met. So it's super pressure.
That's right.
Sometimes the other performers really feel it.
But you can get some wonderful results from that sort of situation.
And so far we have, yeah. So first one we had the lovely Chandel Cook, which is a really great established singer down in Geelong. She used to sing with the Chandel Jazz Quartet, which features some of Geelong's best jazz musicians. In the second one we had Wayne Jerry, who's a fabulous blues singer, and he's played a number of times at the Bennett's Lane and Jazz Club. So next one we've got coming up is featuring members of the ribbon section of Club Hot Swing, who you might know.
Yes, I've heard of them.
They play quite often at the Paris Cat. So they're on the gypsy end of jazz, so that's going to really test me.
Love that stuff. And you've got some upcoming gigs in Melbourne too.
I do. Paran Market this Sunday. You can say hello to me. Down on the coast again, though, I've got a lovely solo piano recital at Queenscliff Uniting Church, which is on May 19th. Then back in Geelong on the 26th of May, we're back with Geelong Jazz Soirees with those beautiful bass and drums and piano.
Fantastic. Sounds like it's definitely worth the trip out to that side of town. So I urge everyone to go and see Callum in his many different guises. So thank you so much for coming on the program. It was an absolute pleasure hearing you play and hearing all about your life and career.
Wonderful to come to Free MBS.
Yes, well, thank you. Are you a regular listener?
Yes, I enjoy my Free MBS on my train journeys to Box Hill on a Thursday morning, listening to intermezzo or maybe a bit of jazz when I'm coming home, of course.
Of course. Yeah. One of the things I love about this station is the opportunity that we have to welcome people like yourself into the studio to play and talk about what you do. And perhaps for the people who haven't heard of you, that's a real open door now to come and see you live.
Yeah, it's a great organisation, isn't it? Yeah, we've got to keep it.
Absolutely. And so from that, I should segue into the fact that we are in the middle of our Radiothon at the moment. If you are enjoying the programs, please ring in during business hours and become a subscriber if you're not already. And there are many great prizes, as you will have no doubt heard, read out over our many programs over the last few days. So please do support the station. We need you to stay on air. And what this station does is quite unique and very, very valuable in the community.
Agreed.
Thank you, Callum.